is one of the most researched and studied relics in church history, and profoundly impacts many who encounter its mystery.
As a person of faith, looking at it through the eyes of faith, I don't think it can help but touch your heart.
Something that we can look on not only to bolster our faith in those moments of weakness, but also to deepen our faith and our appreciation, our intimacy with Christ.
Join Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry as they examine the science of the shroud through the lens of faith.
Really interesting scientific information that we didn't know about, like the pollen from all the different regions of the world. As the shroud traveled around, it picked that up. Some of the mites, things like that was really interesting to me. I mean, this made you really want to believe it a lot more.
It's impressive. Like, humanly, I don't think that is another level of love. It's not I'm gonna see people like, oh, I love you, I'll give you a chocolate. No. I'm giving you more than my life. I'm giving you my suffering.
Asking both experts and disciples, who do you say I am?
As far as who the man of the shroud is, I, as a person of faith and kind of reviewing the evidence there, it seems that a convincing argument can be made that it's Jesus of Nazareth.
Visit patchworkheart.org/shroud to learn more and get exclusive behind-the-scenes updates for your support.
The St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, in partnership with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network, presents a podcast for families in crisis.
Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. This is Anne DeSantis, Executive Director, joined by our Board President, Mickey Kelly. This is our 10 tips for healing for divorced and separated Catholics. We're actually on podcast number 9. We're almost finished this series. And I want to welcome you, Mickey. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hi, Anne. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great series because we've covered a lot of different topics for healing for the divorced. And I think what I can do to begin with is just read those steps and what we've already unpacked during this 10-part series, and then what we'll be discussing today. So the list is, number 1 is acceptance of your situation. 2 is finding proper help and resources where needed. 3 was stepping back from too many commitments to be with family. 4 is seeking God's help through prayer and sacrifice. 5, developing your faith in greater ways. 6 was prayer. 7 is sharing your story with trusted friends to give guidance and fellowship. 8 was, if you're not an old, find out more. And this podcast is number 9, is developing healthy new friendships with those who have faith. And our last one, which I'll just tell you what the topic is for next month, is to get involved in some ministry in order to help others. So let's talk about this, about developing healthy new friendships with those who have faith. And I think we really want to emphasize that part about with those who have faith, because you can really find healing when you're surrounded by people who share your faith with you, the Catholic faith. And so I'll hand it over to you, Mickey, because I know that you and I are both very much in agreement with that, not just for divorced and separated, right? For pretty much everyone.
Yes, and actually, I think you bring up a good point, especially with our topic that, because honestly, I think you and I have seen on social media today that there's always these like memes circulating. Like you have the things that kind of like make you laugh, and then there's like the ones that like give you like I kind of call it like your nugget of the day, like your wisdom nugget. And I always recall like there's this one circulating that it's okay to weed out those are like causing like toxic things in your relationships. And let's face it, I think many of us, and we've collectively, and we have seen it ourselves, like with family members who I think more of themselves, Yeah, and they probably like are like saying things to cause us to maybe like, to compromise on like our standards that we have, morals or whatever the case is. I think what we need to do is we have to realize that there are people out there that want to build us up. At the same time, there are people who want to tear us down. So we have to discern wisely who we want to be around more. Because if you want to be around people that tear you down, you're going to be brought down yourself. If you're going to be around people that are going to build you up, they're going to help you strive for holiness, whatever the case is, then you are in good company.
Yes, well said. It's very true. You hear that expression, that secular expression that we hear quite often, that misery loves company. And I think what we can learn from that simple expression is that whatever sentiment we are living in ourselves, it's either going to attract or detract people. And we can look at that same exact thought, sentiment, when it comes to our faith. And that when we're faithful people who are living our faith, loving our faith, it's attractive. And it's attractive to not just Catholics and Christians, it is attractive to others, to people outside of it. But when we surround ourselves with people who are striving for holiness, Mickey, as you alluded to there, it's going to help us to be better people. And I think when it comes to this topic of being divorced and separated, I think it's pretty safe to say that most people who go through divorce have experienced some kind of negativity. Now, we all know that there's different levels of that negativity when it comes to people who have gone through a separation or a divorce. Some people go through awful divorces with very poor relationships with their former spouse. And there's some people that it's kind of in the middle of the road. And then there's some that actually the whole process isn't as terrible as others. Because for the sake of their children and for the sake of others, they're willing to try to keep it somewhat positive. Now, we know that the breaking up of a marriage isn't a positive thing, and I'm not alluding to that at all, but that they try to, keep the virtue, keep our virtues when we're going through adversity. And those virtues are the humility, the patience, all the different areas that we can grow closer to God. And it helps relationships all the way around, whether it be with an ex-spouse or with our kids or anybody else. And so I really think that what you just offered, Mickey, there, it's really wonderful advice. Now, I did find an article, which I do this frequently on this podcast. It's called 6 Steps to Cultivate a Friendship or Better Live the Christian Life. And it's from a website called Catholic-link.org. And I'm just going to read through some of the things that they're listing here of ways to cultivate friendships and Christian life. The first one, I'll read them first, then maybe just kind of go backwards with the descriptions. They say be interested is one. 2 is getting to know him, and the him is Jesus and our faith. 3 is making myself known. And the next one is having patience. 5th is imitating the good. And 6 is showing affection, and that would be for others and for God. So if I'm backing up a little bit, and I'd like to unpack these during the podcast, is being interested. It says here that for whatever reason, we don't always approach God with the purest of intentions. And this person is saying, I have friends who encountered Christ because they attended a Catholic youth gathering just to meet a girl. The majority of friendships started with an encounter between strangers from which came an interest of something else. We have never been strangers to God, but maybe he has been one to us. Until there was a first encounter, where something in him captivated us, an initial attraction, a curiosity about a mystery which appeared before us. So Mickey, let's talk about that, because the first one here lists is being interested. And that's a good example that I think we need to really look at our own intentions when we want to get close to God and to meeting Christian friendship and Catholic friendships with others, is look at our intentions and why we want to do something. Because this person is saying at the beginning of what I read, they attended a Catholic youth gathering just to meet a girl. Let's talk about that.
I think the first step for many people to form the friendships is to get involved with. I mean, I may say this a little bit with city. I may gear this to young adults, but that's okay. I think the first thing I would say for young adults is attend young adult gatherings that are offered near you. In fact, in Philadelphia, and I know your daughters are, and your soon-to-be son-in-law, of course, they know this quite well, that we're very blessed to have a very active and growing young adult scene. And it is just, and I've been involved with the young adult scene, very active with it for like the past like decade, maybe more. I've lost count, but anyway, one of the things that I would say to the young adults is if they're going, when they go through a family crisis, whatever the case is, divorce, or go to young adult gatherings, and find yourself that group. Men, get involved with the Knights of Columbus. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. I've been in the Knights for 14 years, and I would tell you, I have spoken with guys that have been in there maybe like twice or three times, like my experience. Some of them have gone on to a gig with the state or more. And one guy once told me that some of his closest friends happened to be made from the Knights of Columbus, and they got at one point where they were traveling together, like to the conventions, to the different events, whatever the case is. For the women, attend blessed. There are blessed is she or BIS, the acronym, brunches that happen. Locate those, attend them. Attend a women, and this is for both actually. Attend a Bible study. Like I know they have a men Bible study, and then there'll be a women Bible study. Attend these, and there's also another thing that's been kind of gaining popularity with this. But you have the men's school and you have the women's school, and there are these people that would have these week by week videos that probably like run for like 3 to 4 months, and there's like a subscription to it that you have to pay like a certain amount, and you attend these. There's like a webinar, and then you have a quiz or something. But in between, you also have like a bi-weekly session, like a group session to like unpack everything you learn. And did anything jump out at you? Those are the ways that I think would help perfect you a little more to have a better marriage, or help you take the first step in healing from. Because I would guarantee you, the speakers that you encounter, they will say things that make you just go, wow, like I never even thought of that. I can promise you they're not going to be judgmental. They're not going to say, what were you thinking? They're not going to say anything around those lines. But what it boils down to is this. In order for people to thrive in our society, and in order for Catholics to thrive for sainthood. And if you look at the many saints in the church, many of them were part of a group of, like, we're part of this big group. You look at St. Ignatius, St. Francis Xavier. They were Jesuits. They were close friends. They were roommates at one point. They became the first Jesuits. You look at St. Francis of Assisi, St. Clare of Assisi. They were good friends. You look at St. Rosa Lima, St. Martin de Porres. They were close friends. St. John Paul II, St. Teresa of Calcutta, the bestest of friends. So there's saintly goals right there, folks. So thrive for that. But bottom line, like I said earlier, we need those friendships that would help us achieve accountability, help us to build our faith, and uphold the virtues that are needed and uphold and also do things that would help Catholics just to become better.
Yeah, well said, because that's the goal of life, isn't it? The goal of life is for us to become saints, to be with the Lord, to be in communion with Him and with others for eternity. And I think when we lose that goal in our minds and our hearts, when there's some kind of an adversity that comes, and of course, as I have said before during this series, we recognize that divorce and separation can be a traumatic event for families, for couples, the ending of a marriage and the starting of a different life after that. And so that's one reason we exist, is to accompany you, to let you know that we're here for you, this foundation, and why we were founded. And so I think Mickey's spot on when he says the importance of friendships and the importance of keeping that close relationship with God. And that when you have the desire to meet with other people and make new friends, that you put God at the center of that. It's just going to change everything. And on that topic, number 2 of this article, The 6 Steps to Cultivate Friendship by Catholics-link.org, is to getting to know Him. And the Him, of course, is Christ. It says here that interest is not enough. It's like a small flame or flicker, but that will blow out at any time. How many interesting people we've met and then forgotten. Little by little, every friendship requires getting to know the other person better. It's the same with Jesus. Initial faith, be it big or small, requires formation to get to know it better. There are many ways to know Jesus. For starters, the best way is through the Gospels and the sacraments. And then this person says that they also recommend to study a little, maybe the catechism or through a friend who can instruct us. He who seeks finds. I think it's very important that if we're seeking to make friendships with those who have faith, that we have to get to know our Lord more, don't we? We have to get to know Him through attending Mass. And as this article is saying here, that looking at the Gospels, I know, Mickey, that you've done a lot of that with doing these weekly reflections on your own personal YouTube channel. And I think it's a great idea for us to let you give us an opportunity to tell us about that channel, because you have really taken a step forward to educate people about those Sunday reflections. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, and I think I think that article really gives something that we need more. Because I feel like, especially the fallen away Catholics, when they've had some kind of epiphany, so to speak. And let's face it, I think let's face it, our Catholic Church is not squeaky clean at all. We've had good popes, we've had bad popes, and we've had ugly episodes, whether it's the clergy abuse scandal that has been surfacing a couple decades ago, and every so often there'll be more coming out, and that's very unfortunate that these priests and bishops, they would allow these perverts to run amok, while everyone thinks like, oh, this is, he's a great priest and everything, but sometimes we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, because honestly, and that's why many people did fall away from the church, because of that scandal, or because they think that the church has too many rules. Well, why do you think there's a flag thrown during a football game, or there's balls and strikes, or that someone can be out like this way or that way in baseball? But to go back to that, the point you made, Anne, is that what we have to understand is that God talks to us when we read His Word, when we read the lives of the saints, when we read the catechism, like you said. And let's face it, I don't think many Catholics understand the catechism at all. And of course, those of us who are listening, if you would like to delve into the catechism, Father Mike Schmitz, who does the Bible in a Year, will be launching a Catechism in a Year podcast on New Year's Day, 2023. So don't forget to subscribe to that and join in. And this will cover the basics of the catechism, and of course, this may make you flinch a little bit, but the core teachings that some of us seem to not accept fully. So yeah, you might want to listen in and understand why the church has spoke out against abortion, euthanasia, birth control, etc., and gay marriage. The list goes on. But to go back to but anyway, one of the things that we have to really understand is that in this day and age, like, you encounter people who are insecure, immature, or closed-minded. But I can guarantee you, when you open the book, whether it's a catechism or the lives of the saints, it will help you understand more about God and what your purpose is in life.
Yeah, purpose in life means a lot. It really does. And for people who are listening to this podcast who are affected in some way by a divorce or separation, or those friends of theirs. I mean, we get people who listen to this podcast that could be the children or the friends or grandparents, whoever that would be. But you made some excellent points. I also want to point them out too, though I did mention this during my time of reflection before you were talking, that you have that YouTube channel, and I believe it's called The Catholic Philadelphian. So if you want to check out that YouTube channel, everyone, you can listen to those gospel reflections by Mickey Kelly on a weekly basis, because I believe he does them for the Sunday Mass. And going back to my article, the 6 steps to cultivate friendship, because that's, going on our topic here. Number 3 is to making myself known. And I think what the author here is referring to is that sometimes we can become shy, we can become a little timid about meeting people. And maybe there's a little bit more too, but this person here says on the article that no friendship flourishes if I don't make myself known. Sometimes, however, it's quite difficult. We find it hard to trust. We don't want to end up hurt, or we sometimes don't even know ourselves well enough in order to let others know us. I have to make myself known to Jesus, not because he does not know me, but because he wants me to willingly open my heart to him. This most beautiful space to do this is through prayer. In it, there are no barriers, and before his gaze, we can all be free. In this way, we also grow in humility, which is walking in the truth. So that shyness, that timidness, isn't just with other people in friendship, it's also with God too. But we have to remember that he already knows what's inside of our hearts, doesn't he? Mickey, I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Fulton Sheen actually had a very good quote, Anne. In order for God to come into some hearts, he has to break them. And I think many of us could think that God can come into our hearts by breaking them through a toxic romantic relationship that you think it's all rainbows and butterflies and everything, but in reality, you hit with the fact that maybe this person is abusing you spiritually, physically, or even mentally, or a combination of all three. But you deserve better, of course, as the saying goes. And truthfully, God wants you in wants to be a part of your life, and it will take some kind of courage or discernment to understand, why did this happen? Why did he intervene? Those are some of the things we have to ask ourselves, like, why? But we have to be really open-minded. And one of those ways is, first off, you speak with God through prayer. But when you read his word, he speaks to you.
Yes, God speaks to us. I think he speaks to us in a lot of different ways through the events of our day and even through other people. There's many ways that the Holy Spirit works, but some excellent points there. And I keep referring back to this article because basically I want to make sure that I cover all the points, because I do think it's a good one. related to this topic of developing and seeking new friendships, especially those who have been affected by divorce. And one of the things it says here in this article is having patience. The author says that as much as we love friends, sometimes we also have to be patient with them and they with us. In the Christian life, patience is key. Jesus is infinitely patient with us, and he asks us to be patient as well. But not just any kind of patience. It's what proposed by St. Peter called hypomone, a patience full of hope, for it is filled with trust in God. It's not only to stoically endure, it's knowing that God, with God by our side, everything will be okay. I would even dare to say that we also have to be patient with Jesus, who frequently changes our plans, but it's always for our own good. Now think about that, what Mickey said, those toxic relationships that people get involved in. Now, of course, this topic is for divorced and separated, and sometimes there are toxic relationships related to marriages, but there's all kinds of toxic relationships too, which could be friendships or with other relatives or even just people in your life. So we need to be patient not only with ourselves, but with other people. And remembering that God will provide in his time too. He really does. And I believe that friends are people that they get to know us and we get to know them. And the friendships that last are people who don't give up on you and you don't give up on them either, because you're patient with each other. And good friendship is something that takes not just a year or 2 years, it takes kind of a lifetime to get to know people. But making new friends is always a good thing because God desires us to have community. And if you're affected by divorce in some way, traumatized by a situation of the past, when you develop those new friendships, it is a way that you can find healing. Mickey, I know you would agree on that because you and I are both proponents of making new friends and finding community, especially good Catholic community.
Absolutely, Anne. In fact, I think that's something that we have. I think that's something Catholics have kind of lacked over the years, is that sense of community. And of course, I think like the commune is kind of also we also see that in communion, among other forms of that. But to your point, Anne, and I think in order for society to thrive, is we need to get that like-minded community together. You hear the secular phrase, it takes a village, but I honestly think it takes a God-fearing community in order to raise people up into the faith, to build up more vocations in the church, and the whole list goes on. But to be fair, like you said, and I think we just have to constantly put ourselves out there. It's like in the passage where Jesus says cast your nets out into the deep, and eventually you will get something.
Yes, cast your nets out into the deep and eventually you will get something. And that's something that really relates to what I just said right before you were speaking about the patience, because having patience will help us to endure. And I want to go back to this article, 6 Steps to Cultivate Friendship, on Catholic-link.org. Number 5 is imitating the good. And it says that good friends give us a good example. The best friend of all, Christ, gives us the best example. We also have the saints, each of us whom is already ready to be our friend. They're there, eagerly waiting for us to ask them. In the Christian life, it's not wrong to look at other people's virtues. Surely not to envy them, which sometimes happens, but to emulate them. That is to want to imitate them. Anything goes if it helps us to truly strive to be better. Now, I think that's a great point when it comes to making new friends. Just say you've been divorced and you've gone through a real adversity, not only with that relationship, but with your family and just your whole life being uprooted. And when you're meeting those new friends, and as this says here, good friends give us a good example, is that it's sort of like when they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because a good apple, right, bears good fruit. And of course, that's all over scripture too, with Jesus's reference to the bearing of good fruit. And when we seek good fruit through healthy, good friendships, Catholic and Christian friendships, we will grow, and we will grow toward our ultimate goal, which is heaven. So let's talk about that, Mickey, the idea of imitating the good and how important that is by connecting with very good people.
I think one of the things we have to really do is, I think one of the things you have to look for in your friendships is, do these people do more than just Netflix and chill? So are these people involved with any type of ministry, whether it's doing things for the homeless, participating in the culture of life, it's promotion? Do they help out in, let's say, RCIA? Do they help out, as I also alluded to some examples earlier about, men? Are you involved in Knights of are these guys involved in Knights of Columbus? Are they part of the Legion of Mary? Are they part of the Flame of Love, which that started to grow, little by little? Ladies, do you have friends that are involved with, women Bible study, or, things that are like, on the feminine, on the feminine spectrum? Then you have to have gentlemen who are on the masculine spectrum. Do these people mentor young people to be, good, faithful, God-fearing citizens? Do these people have respect for their friends, or people are like, in their interactions with other people, whether it's a stranger or people they meet on a regular basis? Those are some of the things we have to look for.
Yeah, good points. And I love your reference to different like Catholic groups, organizations like Legion of Mary or Knights of Columbus, different things. I mean, there's so many wonderful organizations within the church that you or I can get involved with. And if you're not familiar, I mean, I think the first place to go is to your own parish. Take a look at that church bulletin and see what's available at your own parish or your own diocese or archdiocese. And if it's not your parish, sometimes churches that are close by might have more offerings too. And I certainly don't think it's a sin to go to another church and get a church bulletin or go on their website and see what's there and see how you can get connected and get active. So I think they're excellent examples. And especially on that topic that we just had about imitating the good, it's a great way to imitate the good when we seek after virtue in that particular way. And the last thing on this article, the 6 steps to cultivate, this is number 6, is showing affection. And I'll just read what it says here by our author. It says, or in other words, in reality, love. Affection and friendship is necessary. It simply has to be expressed. The important thing is what lies behind it, and that is loving others. Sometimes we only do so on our own terms, but it's important that the other person knows it. In the Christian life, the culmination is charity, which has to be put into action. Since it's not enough to, quote, love in theory, in your mind or intentions, it's not that hard to make a parallel between the construction of a friendship and the path we walk along the Christian life. Walking the Christian path of life is to become, with each day, a closer friend to one person, Jesus. You can probably add many other stages because relationships between people, and even more with Jesus, are incredibly rich. They're also full of risks, but risks are worth taking in order to encounter God and to allow Him to encounter us, which is what He wants the most. I think that's a really good article too. And I love that last part about love, because You know, love is really the centerpiece of what it means to be Catholic and Christian. The way that we love God and the way that we love others. And on this topic again of cultivating Christian friendship, especially after facing some kind of an adversity such as divorce or separation, it gives us a way that we can walk the Christian path of life, as the article says. And that path begins with Jesus Christ, but it extends out to everyone we meet when we imitate his virtues. And so I also want to just give you this article again, because I think this one's really worth you looking up on your own. It's called 6 Steps to Cultivate a Friendship or to Live Better the Christian Life. And then it says in parentheses, after all, aren't they the same? And the author is Kenneth Pierce. And again, that is Catholic-link.org. So as we come to a close almost for this podcast, not quite though, Mickey, let's talk about love and what this article says about showing affection. It's not talking about physical affection. It's talking about what lies behind charity, right? So let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure. I think, well, I mean, we have the different, different languages of love. And we kind of see that quite a bit in the Gospels, like, how Jesus loved those that, loved his neighbor, loved those who were, persecuting him, bearing false witness against him and all those things. But I think one of the things that we have to understand is that we should love through our actions. I mean, not just like going around kissing or hugging people, but I mean, things like, trying to be there for people who need it. I mean, if you think about it, people go through for our case, Anne, they go through a divorce and they think that they're done with love, but in reality, they're not. And I think that some people seem to forget that we're all made for love. And who loves us the most? God our Father.
Yes, God our Father loves us the most. And well said. And when we receive the Eucharist, let's talk about that too. Well, as we come to a close, I think going to Mass, receiving the Eucharist, going to Eucharistic adoration is the true body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. And as they say, and even in secular terms, that God is love. Jesus is love. So the Eucharist is also love. And when we receive the Eucharist, we become who we receive when we do it in a reverent way and when we open ourselves to the Holy Spirit so that we can be another Christ to all that we meet. I think it's a great way for you and I and Mickey and whoever is listening to this podcast, for us to begin to do our mission and also fulfill ourselves in that way that we can make Christian friendship. And I keep referring back to you who are affected by divorce, or even if it's somebody that you know that's affected by divorce or separation. As I say, we get a lot of those people too. Is that doing these things that we're talking about during this podcast are ways that you can heal and grow and to fulfill your own mission. Mickey, did you have any final words before we end?
Just to highlight everything that I said. First off, to the ladies, surround yourself, form a squad of sisters that will help you strive for holiness. Attend the Bible studies, attend the Blessed is She retreats. For the gentlemen, get involved in Knights of Columbus. But for both people, this is easy. You can do. Find an adoration chapel. Take with you a journal. Take with you a rosary, a Bible, or if you have a subscription to, say, the Magnificat, Hollow, or whatever else you get the readings for, like the daily readings and, of course, the Sunday readings. Take that with you. Even if you can't get to Mass, like, just reflect on the readings. Just figure out like, okay, what does God want me to do today? And you go through the readings, almost like the Lectio Divinae format. All right, you read a passage and be like, okay, what should I do here? Blah, 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 blah. And, journal it, date it, journal it. And then when you go to Mass, if you want to get more out of it, take something out of the priest's homily and find out what the priest is saying. Like, how can we be like Christ, going into the new week? And likewise, another thing we could do is every time you pray the rosary and like the scriptural rosary, like figure out like, okay, how can I implement the virtue of this decade, more in my spiritual life? Those are some of the things like we really have to ask ourselves. And I can promise you, you will really build up the spiritual muscle you need to live out your faith. And also find that those ways to heal from the brokenness you suffered, from the broken relationships you've endured.
Beautiful advice. And I especially like the references to the rosary and to the sacraments and to getting involved with your faith, meeting people, like you mentioned, something like the Blessed is She retreats or other events that people can do. Of course, in Philadelphia here for men, we have the Man Up Philly conference. If you're in the Philadelphia area, definitely Google that one, check it out. But there's all kinds of things that you can do within your Catholic faith, whether they be larger group events or something at your parish. Sometimes at the parish level, there are events and retreats and groups and prayer opportunities with people that are right there in your own small group community. So I just encourage you to do that. Mickey, thank you so much for being the co-host with me today on this podcast.
And it's always a pleasure. And to those of you who are listening to this episode, be assured of Anne and I's prayer for each and every one of you. So, drop us a prayer request. Let us know how we can pray for you. But most importantly, start taking that leap of faith today. If you want to improve your faith and take that first step to healing, we are here for you, and we always will be.
Amen. Thank you so much. That's right. We are here for you. Be sure to go to nonnatus.org to the drop down for send a prayer intention. And you can send that prayer intention directly to us. God bless everyone. We'll see you next month here for the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. 10 tips for healing for Catholics affected by divorce. See you then.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more information about the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, visit nonnatus.org or email director.srnf@gmail.com. Did you enjoy this podcast? Listen to other podcasts from Patchwork Heart Ministry by following Patchwork Heart Radio wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Shroud of Turin is one of the most researched and studied relics in church history, and profoundly impacts many who encounter its mystery.
As a person of faith, looking at it through the eyes of faith, I don't think it can help but touch your heart.
Something that we can look on not only to bolster our faith in those moments of weakness, but also to deepen our faith and our appreciation, our intimacy with Christ.
Join Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry as they examine the science of the shroud through the lens of faith.
Really interesting scientific information that we didn't know about, like the pollen from all the different regions of the world. As the shroud traveled around, it picked that up. Some of the mites, things like that was really interesting to me. I mean, this made you really want to believe it a lot more.
It's impressive. Like, humanly, I don't think that is another level of love. It's not I'm gonna say, oh, I love you, I'll give you a chocolate. No. I'm giving you more than my life. I'm giving you my suffering.
Asking both experts and disciples, who do you say I am?
As far as who the man of the shroud is, as a person of faith and kind of reviewing the evidence there, it seems that a convincing argument can be made that it's Jesus of Nazareth.
Visit patchworkheart.org/shroud to learn more and get exclusive behind-the-scenes updates for your support.